Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions 4 p.m. BST on a Wednesday afternoon. Today's in-depth is with John Hefter. How you doing, John?
I'm doing terrific. How you doing, Danny?
Yeah, good. Do you want to let the guys know what you've been up to this week and the share to the groups, and then we'll get into your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So obviously a busy time of year for anyone who's in the Amazon space. So we had a pretty wild and fruitful, sort of Black Friday, Cyber Monday season. And
do you want to just give the audience an idea of how many Black Fridays and Cyber Mondays you actually had?
Yeah, no, I would say that was interesting about it is we were expecting some pretty significant spikes on the actual days that were supposed to be big, but what we actually found was more of a consistent from Thanksgiving on through Monday was very consistent numbers almost every day. So it's sort of like culturally people took a shift and just assumed that everything was sort of Cyber Monday from Thanksgiving on.
Gotcha.
But overall, yeah, no, it was really good. We were lucky enough to line up some really good deal of the days and things like that. We've been preparing for this for months. So worked out well. We've been doing our best with inventory. Obviously it's been an issue for a lot of people. So super happy with the results and, looking forward to the rest of the holiday season for sure.
Sounds good. Right, let's get into your story. Take us back to your childhood. Walk us through some of your earliest memories.
Yeah, sure. I would say this, that I had a really, really happy childhood, for the most part. Even when things were bad, I always seemed to be optimistic about whatever was coming next. My parents were really loving people, and they were a lot of fun, insightful, definitely focused on reading and education and just sort of pseudo being enlightened, I would say, looking at the world from a holistic perspective and trying to be open to new information. So from that, it was very exciting. I had two adopted siblings. I have one brother who's a natural brother. And the household was wild and energetic, and we were the type of place where we always had people coming and staying with us, relatives or friends, and lots of friends over. And it seemed sort of idyllic and bucolic, I would say, early in my childhood. And that to me is most of my memories were really positive. My father was a children's book author as one of his careers, and he did over 200 kids books, and overall was really just a warm person, really smart, kind of stoic in a way. When he spoke, it meant something, but he didn't always speak.
He was a man of few words.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then my mother was more of a wild spirit, dress designer, pilot, like wild woman, I would say. Dressed impeccably, had a really loud mouth, and would run it to anybody. It would be my
She's from Manchester, England, is it?
Totally, yeah.
So she's from Stern Stock, yeah.
Yes, yeah, and like there's always a famous story that it reminds me of her. She wear like Hermes scarves, and I think it was a way to offset sort of like her beginnings. Was the way she was going to present herself always impeccably, right? Yeah. To sort of hide where she sort of came from. But you'd see that side of her come out every once in a while. And I remember my brother was in the car with her, but she witnessed a car accident, and it was an old lady who I think caused it. And this other lady came out of the car and started pushing around the old lady. And my mother went out, and I'm not going to do her accent, and I won't do it justice, but she basically said that, if you take your hands off that lady, or I'm gonna go get my gun and I'm gonna blow your freaking head off. Right. And she meant it like serious as a heart attack, sitting there with her Hermes scarf and her gold earrings and all the stuff. Like she was a tough woman. But she was also free and irreverent and a risk taker.
Yeah.
She sort of adopted both of my siblings on sort of a whim in Thailand. And she flew over there originally to get one child, and then my parents realized how bad the orphanages were in Bangkok in 1976 or whatever. And they adopted my sister, and then technically illegally adopted my brother and forged documents, and went home on two separate flights. and dressed my brother up as a girl and just made copies of their birth certificates to take them home. So I think it kind of points to sort of the type of people that they were.
But they got the job done.
They did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say, for my father, I love telling this story. Is like, he was raised in a single parent household. He was told that his father died in the war, and his mother, to make ends meet, was a female boxer during the war, as like a rooftop sort of like sideshow type boxer. And then my dad made money working for his sort of like pseudo mob uncles, and he remember he was running money for his uncle, and then he showed up one day and to drop money off, and the guy was shot through the chest, and his uncle was like, "Oh, we'll get you a different job," So he had kind of a wild and free upbringing, and he was smart, and so he skipped a bunch of grades back when that was sort of more popular, and was in and out of college and graduate school by the time he was 18. I think he was entirely done, and was on his own from age about 16. So I think it created like a really independent vibe to who they were. And some of that, I think, I would say, frankly, leaked down to me.
Yeah. Well, what would you have said is rubbed off on you? Because I'm going to say about your father's an award winner, wasn't he, in terms of his books?
Yeah.
What was it like working with someone who's goes through that cycle, the creative process? Because you get writer's block and all sorts. You go on a bit of a tangent late nights. So, some people can get up and write in the morning. Some people do their best work in the evening and work through the night. What was it like being around your dad for that?
My dad's pragmatic approach to everything, and his ability to work was astounding. And that to me was really, to have someone as bright as he was to do the amount of output that he did. And most memories of my father are him working, right? He had a home office and he had an office too, but like he never stopped. And to me, that sort of persistence was admirable, even from a very young age. As far as like the ethereal nature of creativity, I think he had it. I'd like to think I have some of that too, and it just sort of comes, right? It's sort of there, and if you're able to exploit it and you have the resources to do it, it can come through.
Was he the type of person that would just put something on the page? He's like, he got, like, from a stoic point of view, it's like, I have to do something. It doesn't have to be amazing, but I can shape this. So each day, because writers will go off and not do nothing for weeks until they get inspiration. And then some writers just say 500 words, 1,000 words. As long as I get them down, they don't have to be great, but they can be turned into something.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just happens in the oddest moments. Normally, when I'm relaxing, that's when I'm most creative, or when I come up with ideas that I think will really sing. But I love that process. I know my dad did too. It was intimidating, to be frank with you, to be in the same household with him. Not anything overtly that he did, was just when you have someone who was like really sharp and did so many amazing things, you sort of have a natural sense to feel inadequate.
Yeah.
Right. So I try to sort of play that off with being a little bit more humorous than he was. I was better at making jokes and making people laugh than maybe he was. And that became a challenge sort of childhood, as I sort of like moved on and hit my preteen and teen years. That's when things, I would say, as a family, sort of started to go a little bit south. Although I'd say we took it with grace. I mean, my mom got MS. She had it for about 20 years before she passed. And all of a sudden she was very sick. My dad had some health problems. Unfortunately, both my adopted siblings had some pretty serious mental illness issues that they had to deal with. My brother Nick is a wild man who I love dearly, but he had a pretty amazing, I would say, childhood where he had to go to some schools because he had some real issues. He became an amazing trumpet player. Eventually went to the same boarding school that I went to. He had kicked out because when he was 16 or 17, he was sleeping with my dad's secretary, who was like 27. And she took him out for a weekend, and he decided not to come back, and sort of like famously got escorted out. Eventually, he moved to South Carolina, got in some trouble with the law, spent some time in real jail, became like a priest, more or less, in prison, and then became like a ski instructor and a crab fisherman, and now has this nice little successful business out in Nantucket, like remodeling bathrooms, but a free spirit nonetheless, certainly there. And one of the reasons why I'll talk about this sort of stuff freely and why I was excited to do this was, my mother was always open about speaking about her foibles or weaknesses or missteps. And I think it's important because it gives you agency.
Oh, great. I do it every day on here. I'm happy to show myself up, just be brutal, honest and stuff, and I'll make mistakes. Well, I think it's really important, and agency is a key word. I think this year, a lot of people have been speaking about agency and setting boundaries. And I think it's been really key. Sorry, go on, Karen.
And for me in New England, where I've lived for a decent portion of my life, that's not the way people approach things. They sort of hide problems. They sort of pretend that they live in this perfect world, and they're devoid of all things that could be bad. But all of us make missteps. All of us, it's what makes people interesting is when they own them and overcome them, right? And what makes people grow is failure, right? And to me, there's no doubt that some of the negative things in my life eventually led to better things on the backside, and without them, I went to some of those like really sort of in the movies type Thai boarding school, and they're more popular over in England, but in the US, it's more of a niche thing, and what I noticed was the people who came out the other side doing better were not the ones who were born in privilege and sort of had everything spoon fed to them and had life easy. It was actually the complete opposite. It was the kids who came in whose parents scraped to get them in there, or they had some sort of tragedy or something that gave them an edge and the ability to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Right. And I saw from an early age was like the kids who were sort of the silver spoon ones. Often I would go visit their houses sometimes and they would be miserable. Right. The parents, the kids. I remember I was out in like the Hamptons at this giant mansion. It was, and the dad just flat out spoke to me at lunch. I'd never talked to him before. He'd be like, "I'm lonely. I'm super rich and I don't have friends. I've spent all my life working and I have nothing to really show for it." I was 16 at the time. This guy had just met me to sort of like start talking about this. Gave me a very interesting perspective, first on money and then success from a young age, right? Where I was like, this is something I actually want, and it definitely shaped my early years. And I think for me, getting out of school, once that happened, it made me sort of like nihilistic, I would say, almost about money in general in my early years. And then as my parents' fortune kind of crumbled, to be frank with you, my dad made some choices that weren't the best, risky choices that didn't pay off. All well-intentioned and well thought out. Things didn't go according to plan. And then he got sick. And then I had two parents who were not well. Sort of like the financial stability we had like totally started to dissipate and fast.
So was it you kind of gelling things together because you've got two siblings that were adopted? What a beautiful thing that they did. Even dressing them up as both men. Did you say on a flight? Get home. Yeah,
both women. Yeah, both as girls.
Yeah. So basically, what they done is they broke the law to give these children a better life. I mean, you can't do much more sacrifice for that for people and for children, and to bring them up as your own. And you've got this situation where your mum is the risk taker, and then your dad takes you by your mission lower risk, but then the family fortune starts to come down. Where did that leave you in the mix with all those different, not disjointed, but there's so many different things, dynamics going on in your family? You've got like a very powerful image of your mother and your father and your stepsister, your stepbrother, and your brother Nick as well. Where did that fit in for you to hold things together?
So I was always very independent from a very young age, but I decided that, hey, my siblings were causing quite a bit of problems for my parents, and the least I could do was not cause problems for them. So although I was a troublemaker too, I always made sure that it never got back up to my parents. But what eventually allowed me to do was become free myself. And by the time, it reached my late 20s and into my early 30s, my parents had passed. And in some ways, it was a very tough time, particularly when my father died. He passed first. He had been such an anchor to my life and my decision-making process. But in some ways, I know this sounds strange, it was a gift in disguise, because it allowed me to mature and realize that whatever I was going to do going forward was my own.
Yeah. So you feel like you come up underneath. You mentioned earlier on the show is that he was super smart, and then you felt not inferior, but like he didn't intend to do that, but because he was so successful, so smart, so sharp, and you felt that way, that was your feelings, not his, and that allowed you to get up from underneath him in some ways to be your own man, kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I would say this too. I have my oldest brother, Chris, who's my natural brother. Yeah. And Nick was adopted. He worked with my father right out of college. Right. And he was so connected to him until his passing. And it was really tough for my brother to then get out of my father's shadow, in a sense. Whereas I was sort of like, things had already started like going awry, and I was more independent and sort of off. Like, I was able to recalibrate much easier than my brother was able to, because I had this sort of sense of agency and freedom that was mine, right? And I'd started entering into chaotic situations, trying to make order out of them, trying new careers, trying new businesses and failing, and trying whatever it was to sort of get ahead, as opposed to being in a sheltered place. And I really like that. To me, as a parent myself now, is something that's really important to me, is like, children and adults need the ability to fail, and to fail forward, in the sense of like, try things that are chaotic, that make them uncomfortable, and find a way to make order out of them, and make that frame who you're going to be next. Like my sort of archetype of someone I sort of would aspire to be is imagine these like war movies from First World War or whatever, Second World War. And there's always like the bombs are going off and the people are in the trenches and they're holding their helmets. There's always like the general smoking the cigar, who's not afraid of the bombs, who's sort of like comfortable in that the ultimate place of chaos, right? Where
you can be zen, you could be sat straight in the middle of it, carnage going on around you, but you're at peace.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, I've noticed a strain of that in everyone who's performed well in a business capacity, or like, they all kind of have that.
Yeah.
Right. It's like they've sort of been peppered with chaos so much. Things are always falling apart, and you have to fix them, and you have to come up with creative solutions. But if you don't get that practice, and you don't have the ability to go through those experiences, it really can hinder who you might become. And to me, that's the most valuable piece of for me of what might be my success, is that I learned that, and I had so much that went wrong, that then maybe not worry about something in the future going wrong. And it's sort of like the old adage. It's like, if you want success, you have to stop caring about it.
Yeah. Stop chasing it. It'll all happen. Just do the process. Let's go back to just as you left school, you were in boarding school. Where did you go from there? It'd be nice to chart a few of these. I know you said you had some failures along the way. What was your trying to find that discovery? You left boarding school. Did you know what you wanted to be?
No, I didn't. I mean, I would say that like, I went and I was trying to be an economics major, and then I was like, this is boring me. And then I thought about being an English major. And I was actually always pretty good at, I was played sports in high school and could have in college, but decided not to. And I went to school in South Carolina, and I was pretty good at theater, actually. And I just tried out for a play on a whim, and I got like the main stage lead, and then that led to like 2 or 3 more in a row. And then someone told me as I was practicing that, like, if you get the lead in the main stage school play, you get credits towards a major. So I was like, all right, I'll be a theater major, and then when I'm done, I'll move out to California and I'll become a famous writer, maybe performer type person. Totally not thinking it through. And really, I never really cared about the money piece for aforementioned reasons. But what I really cared about was an experiential life, was something where like I had the opportunity to try things that were interesting, that were disruptive and sort of forever new. And my biggest fear was like getting plopped in a cubicle and sort of like seeing that be my sort of end game. Yeah. And I resisted it terribly, right? You know, where I probably had the opportunity to be an economics major, go to business school, end up in one of those tall buildings on Wall Street, like so many of the people I went to high school with. But it just wasn't, it wasn't for me. And so I pursued a creative path early on. And what I found was I got some jobs writing, actually, which were a lot of fun. But what I found was it was really tough to build a foundation that you could build on. Like, I hated the idea of having a temporary success of getting a good writing gig, or, you know, I even like being an editor at a magazine, which I was for a while, but it was really hard to scaffold that into something that was bigger and scalable and all those things. So my luster lost for it really fast. And I remember like living in LA and looking at, I was 22 maybe, you know, looking at these like 38 to 42-year-old actors, right, who still hadn't made it, still lived in their little crappy apartment up of Argyle off of Hollywood. And, you know, we're still trying to play the young Hollywood person. And, you know, it was just like there was an essence of sort of failure, right? And to me, that put in like just a sharp fear into my body that like whatever happened to me, I didn't want that to happen. Yeah. Right. You know, so from there, I went, I moved back to the Boston area, and I ran it was like a hotel bed and breakfast restaurant type place for a year or two. I woke up one day and I was ordering teacups at like 6 a.m. on a Sunday. And I was like, this is not what I want to do. So I left there, and friend of mine who I met through my wife, I'd done some writing with him for the NFL. And then he started working at NASCAR, which is a race car circuit in the United States. And they have like a film division, and they make television shows and produce that sort of stuff. So I went down and started working with him for a few years, got promoted quickly. And then NASCAR corporate came in and actually took over the entire operation. We were subs for them. And they told me that I got promoted too quickly and that I needed to scale down before they could, you know, and I thought it was like, they're not letting talent rise to the top. I don't really like the sport.
Glass ceiling, pushing you out the door. Yeah.
So then I'm there, and I don't know what age I am exactly. Let's call it 27-ish, you know, something like that.
Where are we? Is that in the 2000s or late 90s?
2000s.
Yeah.
You know, and at that point, I'm like, all right, well, I better start figuring something else out. Maybe I'll try business. Not the most sophisticated way to look at the world, but that's sort of how I did. And I got a sales job and was instantly very good at it. Right. It was like right away the top salesperson type thing. And then they didn't have a marketing division, period, at this company at the time. And so I became the marketing division, just learned it on my own and figured that piece out. At that point, it was right around 2008, right when the real estate crash. This business was tied to real estate. They went under quickly. Boom, I'm out with nothing again there. So I moved back up to the Boston area, and one of my boarding school buddies, brilliant genius, also just totally unhinged, great guy, but he's a wild man, asked me to start a business with him, which I did, which was really a sales and marketing business in general. And we built it from scratch. And But whenever we got some money, my partner in general would find a way to spend it and spend it too fast. And so we were always like chasing the next buck. And I remember I would going on sales calls to like just the pits of the country in the United States, just really rough parts of, the world, and being like, hey, we have 2 sales calls. If we don't hit one of these, we're out of business, and I probably went through that like just 10 times. It kind of became thrilling in its own sort of way. And
it's just you survived. You see another day, but the problem is that your luck runs out at some point, doesn't it? So.
Sure, that's exactly what happened, right? But I learned how to sell people. I learned how to create materials, how to sell people. I learned how to not freak out when things were really against it, and not to worry about the idea of like, I might sleep on a couch for a buddy's place for a month or two if this doesn't work out, but I'll be fine. So it was like that failure created courage, right? Because once you do that, and you're like kind of selling in these places that aren't the best and your job's sort of tough and like, but you realize you're okay, then you kind of feel like you can do anything and you can sell to anybody.
And not just that, once you've hit the floor, there's no way, it's only up, it's the other way, isn't it? So
it's like an analogy of like, if you've never been in a fist fight before, you might go around your life like entirely fearful of getting punched in the face, right? Which almost paralyzes you to the fact of like maybe doing it. But once you've been knocked around a little bit, like you realize that you can handle it, and you sort of, your perspective on life sort of changes, right?
Yeah.
And so from there, started this business, eventually sold it, and it didn't make a ton of money. And from there, I started working for one of my clients, and I ran their sales and marketing division. And I really got to a point where I was really good at creating efficiencies. So I got to a point where I was being paid really well, and I was working like 10, 15 hours a week, because I built all the systems. I got the right people in place, and they could do everything for me. And it was like, it was so easy. And for the first year, I was like, man, this is the best. I'm going to learn golf. I'm going to go do whatever I want to do. And then like approach, like getting in my 30s and like, feeling this sort of existential angst, being like, is this all I am capable of? Is this me? Like, should I really be content with not working hard and golfing and sort of screwing off with my friends? I think I'm more than this. I don't know what that is yet, but I need to go find it. So I thought about becoming an educator, and I got a graduate degree to teach high school history. I started doing brand consultations for brands, because I was just really good at general sort of like figuring out what a brand needs to do to succeed. And I wrote a book, hasn't been published yet, but like I was just like, I filled my time with actual productivity. And I wasn't necessarily aimed at anything. I just wanted to be like, I am more than this, and I need to start showing it. Right. I wasn't proud of who I become in a sense of from a working position. And my nihilism had worn off to the point where like, no, I want things. I want a better future for my family. I want to feel like have a gravitas about me, and the respect that comes with someone who works hard and makes smart decisions. So I started jumping in that direction, and eventually I had some nice brand consultations that really worked out well, got a little bit of reputation. And it was right about that time where I met Carlos, and we were at like a cocktail party, and he ran a Facebook ad agency, and he was sort of like kvetching about one of his clients, saying like, we're running these ads, I know what they're doing. And I was like, oh, let me check it out. And because I'm always sort of just open to talk things, I'd be like, oh, this is how I would fix it. I would do X, Y, and Z, and he's like, I think that's a great idea. Can you come in Monday and talk about it? And
this is Carlos from
Thrasio.
That's right.
Yeah. So I was like, absolutely. And I didn't have any, I did all the stuff myself, but I had no formal training. So I had to go look up the proper words to use. And then I put the presentation together, and then, then I started working on some of his brands, and we were really enjoying each other's company. It was fun work. It was engaging. It was, I think it could have led to really good things for the company itself. That was just a pure agency. And Carlos was thinking about doing an exit, and he'd already been working with Josh, also like to think about something to do. And that's when we started playing around with the idea of Thrasio, is what I would say, right?
What year is this?
2016, maybe, I want to say.
Okay. Yeah.
Right around there when we started, maybe 16, 17, somewhere in that
Do
range.
you have any Amazon prior to that, Amazon experience? Were you like sellers and then decided, right, this is what we want to do?
No.
Okay.
No, like one of the things that I think was great is that everyone on the founding team and the people came right afterwards. So that's Carlos, Josh, Stephanie, myself, and then quickly after that, Brandon and Monir and Joe and Ken. Like, all of us were old enough where we had things not go right. So that allowed us to do is to have like a measured understanding of where we needed to be, the ability to know what we will need before we actually need it that day, and to just be adults about the entire process. And I think that was a really fortuitous circumstance. Is like, yes, we stepped into a serendipitous time where it was the perfect time to do this sort of business. Right. But we also had people who had reached for the sun and been burned before, right? Who had like not planned correctly, and then all of a sudden ran into a wall when things got beyond the place of their scale, and had just learned so much, right? And also were connected because of their business experiences. And I think that was a big catalyst that allowed us to sort of take a foothold, grab a thesis that was well constructed, and then scale it. Right?
So how did you, if you don't mind, because I know there's obviously a lot of sensitive stuff that we wouldn't discuss because that's privacy of Thrasio and the companies that you buy. But I'm interested to see how you're all sitting around this table, because if we look where you are, you're the dominant force in the industry. As in terms of call them roll-ups, aggregators, or whatever you want, you've kind of knocked it out of the park, and everyone else is trying to play catch up with you guys. And what's interesting is that none of you were necessarily Amazon sellers. I'm not saying that's the point, but it's interesting that none of you are, right? And how you all manage a large team like you did and be able to sit down and execute on that. Because I've watched you guys grow, and you bought companies that we look after at the agency. Every time I speak to you, you've added 100 headcount. So how did that kind of getting around that table in the room, how did that magic come together?
I think all of us were embraced the unknown, right? Like, you realize that you're humble enough to realize that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
And man, we want to find out everything as fast as possible. And we want to learn from people who really know what's going on. Right. And so that was the first step, was being open with our ignorance, and then really aggressively trying to fill those holes. When we ran into a smart person, like finding a way who knew Amazon, finding a way to consult with them, hire them, figure out their SOPs, build whatever it is that we needed to know it. And then we just have the straight fact of like, man, you start learning a lot when you got 50 brands under your belt, right? And all the sellers who sold to you know things, and there's pieces missing everywhere. And then you just understand the basic tenets of the seller conundrum, which is like, I'm a person who has myself, maybe a partner or two, and 3 VAs in the Philippines or something, right? I can't be good at everything. There's no way that I have a supply chain expert who really knows the intricacies of that piece of the business, or is the best PPC person on the planet, or knows branding back and forth, or knows how to do flat files properly, or deal with POAs, or, you just can't do everything. Right. So our idea was like, what if we build areas of expertise that we can then take a brand and put them through to clean up all of the missing pieces? So when we take over a company, they're good at these 2 things, and that's fine. Those 2 things will probably stay the same or improve slightly, but the other things that are missing, we'll go ahead and fill those gaps. Right. And when we do that, that's how we'll see growth. It's a pretty simplistic approach, really hard to execute. And I will say, like, Josh and Carlos are both brilliant in their own different ways, you know, saw this coming, saw the thought about on brand 3 what we were going to be like when we had 50 brands, and started making plans for hiring the appropriate people who can build the systems that can deal with this sort of scaling, right? That we brought in what some people might have thought a year early, a really top tier president of a large organization, right? Because we knew that, or we thought it was very likely that our 100 person organization at the time would be 500 in a second, which it was, right? So we'd already scaffolded this bridge forward prior to the events actually happening. And then early on too, Carlos is so well connected, and like, he's one of the best networkers I've ever met. You know, we had 40 hires in the door without putting out a CV.
Wow.
You know, it was just people who were really smart from all over the place who were excited to work with us. And, you know, we were running interviews like literally in a Dunkin' Donuts. We didn't have any space. We had this teeny little office like next to a dumpster, and we would sit people down in the coffee shop and try to get them to join our little team or whatever. So, yeah.
So from there, the early days, so we're talking 16, 17, there's you, Carlos, there's a few others they're on the team. What you said, like once you got to brand number 3, and the big thing was like the SOPs and learning all of those different attributes from the other businesses. Did you have any missteps along the way? Like you said about ignorance, what would, if you can say, of course,
sure,
what would you say is one of the biggest missteps that you guys made but corrected?
Sure. Look, we made a lot of missteps, and we were fortunate to come out unscathed. You know, like anything from as ridiculous as leaving a coupon stackable and having someone in the middle of the night right before Christmas clean out $60,000 in inventory. Wow. When that was a massive deal for us, you know, was the type of mistakes we were making early on. Our original thesis wasn't great.
Right.
Like, you know, we had this idea, like we knew we wanted to aggregate Amazon businesses, great, but we didn't know what that meant or which brands were the best targets for us. So we had 2 out of the first 4 were maybe swings and misses in retrospect for different reasons, right? We didn't see the potential writing on the wall or why the product was problematic. You know, I know one right after we closed, you know, one of those like Helium 10 viral launch, or someone had like their new hot product to launch, and I saw one of the products that was the hottest to launch was a company we just purchased. And I knew then, it's like, you know, when you start hearing investment advice from someone at the gym, you know, it's probably time to not listen as opposed to listen. And, you know, we bought something that was like probably filled with shady review generation and lots of sketchy players and just like a dirty space. Was not a good move.
Yeah.
Right. And then we started to, like, once we had a couple of things that did work, then we started to reorientate like what our foundation was going to be. Yeah. Right. And we knew exactly what we wanted, what we didn't want. And then we got more sophisticated as things went on to identify when things are shady, to identify the really upside of the opportunities, to lay them out and build out a process where every brand we goes through this like very in-depth process. And what's comes out the back end is everything we need to do to succeed.
Well, that's why it's important to hire brains from the industry that really are on the sharp end, who understand, not saying they get involved, but understand black hat and a lot of the techniques, which helps you avoid buying companies like that, I suppose.
Yeah. I think that's like, that's super important. And even too, like, you know, like Brandon, I'll give him amazing credit.
Brandon Young.
No, Brandon Hendricks on our team.
Oh, Hendricks. Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
So super sharp guy, and just, he's a workhorse, you know? And so when we were trying to figure out PPC, for example, he piloted like 16 different programs, right? Until we found the one that was best for us to scale.
Yeah.
And who does that? You know what I mean? You might do 3 or 4 and you're like, I like this one now.
Well, he's very sharp. I mean, when we spoke to him, when we'd done a handover for you guys on one of the companies you bought, he asked lots of thoughtful questions. Not everyone does, but he was super sharp. And that's where you know, when you remember people by the questions that they ask. So yeah, I knew he was a sharp guy.
Yep. And it's just like what I'm amazed at looking back is like, even on the finance side and the accounting, the stuff that I'm not really privy to, but like we understood that this was going to be a massive, complex mess with dealing with VAT, with our European accounts, hundreds of different bank accounts, tying them all together, how to make that smooth and presentable, and so we could communicate across departments, and planning for stuff like that a year in advance, and then executing it. It takes a lot of forward thinking, because you get caught in the weeds of your day-to-day business, and that becomes your obsession. For me, when early brand management, like, of course, it takes a sharp person for the most part to run an Amazon business to really get it right. But like, what it really takes is just an obsessed person, right? So our first few brands that we had, Stephanie, Brandon, myself, and a few other people, I would just like, it's a chess game. It was a fun chess game to win. Looking at what the competitors were doing, how the review scores were, what products were they adding, what would their listings look like, how are we going to win this game? How am I going to be more aggressive? Because I don't care about tomorrow's lunch. I care about next year. Right. And that's to me, it's always the not thinking about tomorrow, thinking about a year from now.
Yeah.
And starting to play that game and riding out storms and sticking behind the products you believe in, that you think should be successful, and seeing it through, and being able to boost a listing from 100 different ways, like all the crafty white hat stuff you can do, 15 different types of outside traffic, SEO work, you do better creative, You
guys have been a lot more on top of that recently, haven't you? I mean, you've got Casey on the team doing SEO now, and Casey Goss rejoined a little while ago. That's quite interesting. So let's talk about external traffic. Like you're saying, 15 different resources. How do you guys plan for that as well? Because it's quite an undertaking to measure the analytics across so many external factors.
It is, for me personally, I'm more of the mindset of it, is the collective working, right? It's great to know if you have the data to know, like, this is exactly why this thing works. Yeah. Then great. But I mean, Amazon's such a busy place anyway, a noisy ecosystem anyway. It's really hard to figure out what the hell is going on with anything, with actual preciseness. But I know that like, if I put these 15 pieces together, generally things work pretty darn well.
Yeah, the composite whole. So you don't always know where it's coming from, but those signals are having a good impact overall on the business. Yeah. So what about with obviously Amazon sellers? We all have our hits and misses, right? So you're going to put out a product, you've got to get a few duds. How do you, one, farm out the company that you buy ends up being a bit of a dud? Two, have you actually taken a great company and turned it into a dud by mistake through lack of knowledge? And three, what would you say for you guys is your hit ratio? It's like, we can afford to buy X amount of companies as long as we win X, Y, and Z. So 3 parts of that question. Yeah. Sure.
I'll try to answer that. Good set of questions there. We've been lucky. We haven't turned anything that's great into a dog, period. It hasn't happened yet.
And I didn't mean that in a rude way. It's just like you said about ignorance and not understanding, whereas a founder really knows their stuff about their business, builds it, and someone takes it over, but they don't have that domain knowledge,
Yeah, no, I would say we've had some lipstick wash off the pig. It's been more like the
other way around,
more of a scenario. And now we're at a point, a diligence process will never be perfect. There'll always be new things that people are doing that are hard to figure out or whatever, but generally we kind of know what we're getting. Yeah. Right. So our ability to negotiate terms that make us comfortable in like an actuary sense with the threshold of risk that we have has been something we've really improved upon, to like not just be a point where like, this is available, so we need to buy it. We don't play that game anymore. We say like, what is fair for this, right? And what are the risk factors, right? And that they can be all over the place, from review moats to like new competition entering the landscape to supply chain security, whatever it is. Different companies come with different risk portfolios, right?
When you say review moats, do you mean it's because they've got so many reviews in that category, they're protected, they're moated in? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like, if you have a product with 30,000 reviews and the next closest guy's got 6,000, like your risk is lower than if there's 5 players at 6,000 reviews.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like one of the many factors that we go into sort of like, how are we going to value something? And then for us, even when we get something that has those risk factors, for the most part, we still eventually grow them significantly. And now that we have a history of doing that, to be able to tell the seller, like, you know, tomorrow when you sign with us, you might not get the most money you could get on the market, but by the time you're done with your earn out in a couple of years, you will.
Yeah.
Right. He's like, we're going to take this brand and do a better job with it than anyone else can at the time.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm not saying that as a way of like, you know, that other people couldn't operate Amazon businesses and do awesome with them. I'm saying that like it takes a long time. You can go raise money and start aggregating Amazon brands. A lot of people have started to do that, but to really be sound operators, right? To deal with all of the little complexities and nuances and everything from your, again, your POAs, dealing with like strange ASIN splitting and dealing with flat file fudging and dealing with supply chain issues and bad creative and PPC wonkiness, like to know how to deal with all of that stuff and make it better, you know, it's really complex, and it takes a team of a lot of people who are good at doing all of those things.
And often all that stuff goes sideways at the same time. So, and when you've got to do that at scale, that becomes even more of a complex mess, because especially if you don't have the bodies behind it.
Yeah. So like what we sort of promise is this, is like, all right, we're going to do a quick diligence process because we're really good at doing diligence because we've done it 100 times now. Right. You know, you're going to get paid quickly, and then you're going to make more money on the back end because we're going to run this business as well as it can be run, and everyone's going to win and be happy.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, you're selling it to a secure entity that knows how to manage things. So it's off like it's almost like a relationship. You don't want to be half in it, sell it, and you're on to your next big thing that you want to do.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, so we give the luxury of sort of like convenient and healthy closure to an event that allows people to move on to the next thing without holding someone's hand.
Another thing, what from your point of view on your side of things, like, look, it's business at the end of the day. That you roll up Amazon businesses. I'll ask you what the end game is soon, but how does it make you feel when you hand over the check to the Amazon seller or the brand owner that you know has contributed to a bit of legacy in their life and changed it a bit? How does that make you feel?
Always the coolest thing, right? To me, like that is for me personally, like I like seeing people succeed.
Yeah, same
like, I've never seen myself as a binary of like, am I more successful than this person? Or as I said, I spent my 15 years, 12 years being nihilistic about money. I don't care, right? I care about people's happiness, and I love seeing people succeed. So for me, the idea that and any seller who will meet me too in person will realize that like I will happily help them. Like whether they sell to us or not, I could care less. And I want to see people do well, and there's plenty of space for that. For me though, I remember one of the first people who sold their brands to us, we asked him like, what's the first thing you're going to do? And he was like, I'm going to get braces. And it was just like, that to me was a really wonderful moment. We have a brand owner agreement now where unfortunately the owner had passed and he had a young family. And, the idea that we can sort of do our teeniest part to help him through what's the worst of times is really wonderful. To think that we have people who have the opportunity to live their dream and actually feel what it's like to have real financial security, right? Which when you're running a brand and the numbers can look hot, and you could be on your MDS group or whatever saying I did 3 million last year, but when you're chasing your inventory, paying your taxes and doing everything, like, there isn't that real security. But when you finally get that big chunk in the bank and it's yours and you did it, it's really special and allows people to do the things that they've dreamt of. And to think that we've done that, 90 times or whatever we're on right now, and we'll keep on doing that, to me is the most rewarding thing about this job, besides seeing young people come in to work with us and watching them grow into like the things that they can become. That to me is the biggest reward of this whole thing.
Developing their potential.
Yeah. And to see someone who's like, see all these scrappy people make it, from all kinds of different backgrounds, from all over the world, like have an idea, chase after it, scrap and do it. I mean, it's really the microcosm of what we would perceive to be sort of the American dream is the Amazon ecosystem in hyperdrive. And to me, that's what makes this overall opportunity so special for us. And then secondary to that is just being able to play with really fun toys, great brands, and start doing experimental things with product launches and really getting behind that, working with celebrity and doing some other things that we were doing, right? Like, really keeps me so amazingly engaged every day, where Monday morning is I look forward to it, as opposed to sort of hiding from it.
Yeah. End game. What's the end game? You're the masters of exits. At some point, are you guys going to exit? We'd have to talk numbers. I'm just asking.
I don't know. I would say it's like we've had lots of opportunities where the idea that we could get comfortable is right in front of us. Right? Like we've won whatever, we've won. It's just not really our attitude. Like there's
where can you take it? Like you're the fastest growing profitable startup business in the world, right? Where can you take it now? I know you can add more brands, but what do you think's on the line?
We could potentially become like the future of consumer product groups, right? Like we can build or develop or acquire large, meaningful brands, right? That have international diversity and power and are real players, maybe in the retail space or certainly direct to consumer space, and play with things that were larger than we were able to play with before, and use our same operational chops, right, to make them everything they can be.
Yeah.
And for us, that's what I see us as, testing a wide variety of theses as to what we think will really work for this company, and doing it with the same sort of passion and vigor that we've done everything else, then figuring out of the 15 things we test, which 3 really work for us, and then jam that to the metal like we always, pedal to the metal like we always do. Yeah. And that to me is the fun part. And I'm absolutely thrilled and humbled to be an organization that's remained hungry, right? And still has that same sort of joie de vivre about how we want to approach things and take things on. And that's why it's super exciting. I don't want to stop. Kidding me? No.
You're on the roll now. You're on the roll.
Yeah, it's just too much. It's too much fun, and there's too much left to be explored, to think about. For me, anyway, personally.
Yeah.
In exit.
So moving back to you, darkest hour just before dawn.
Yeah, no, I would say, right. My father, when my father passed, I two moments, I will say, like right when my mom got sick originally, she went a little crazy, and she actually, she had an affair with someone who worked with my father, and I was in the same office in the summertime when it happened. And this was right when my brother was getting into trouble. My sister was heading towards mental institutes, and it was a pretty volatile time for me. That was a pretty dark moment. When my father passed, it was really tough for me. I had not realized anything that I would consider to be like my future yet. Financially, I didn't have anything that was really secure. There was nothing left. I had to work along with my brother Chris to really arrange the funeral, figure out things, do all of that. I didn't really have any aim, you know, so I was just sort of like out there, exposed, seemingly alone. And it was a really tough, probably certainly 3 months or so for me. And then I got this feeling of agency, of like, whatever I do now, it's on me. It's all me. And I have to be everything I can be if I want to get what I want. And it was like a my little mini Phoenix story. Yeah. Right. It was at that moment where I realized, like, all right, I'm going to face the things I don't want to look at. Right. I'm going to take my shortcomings and all my missteps, and I'm going to push them aside, and I'm going to reach for something bigger than I thought I could reach for. And when I get smacked down, I'm going to get myself up, and I'm going to reach even higher.
Love
right.
That.
And that was sort of like for me, that piece.
I'd say I was going to ask the question, legacy or money, but you have both at this stage. So legacy or money? Legacy.
Still don't, I'm not really a money guy. Like it's just like, I grew up around it. Yeah. It loses its luster. Like fame and money, that sort of stuff. Like there's nothing there, man. It's an empty castle. You know, I've met some people with like ridiculous sums of money, and you're in the room with them, and it's like there's this aura. It's like this quiet death around them. It's an emptiness. It's like a void, right? And then you go to someone's house who's just a fulfilled, honest, working person, and there's joy, there's fun, there's, you know, I'm interested in ideas. I'm super lucky to have really wonderful friends that I care about deeply, and a wonderful family and wife and kids. Like, I want to help people reach their best potential. I want to laugh at the tragedies of life and realize that it's like you might as well face everything with humor and help people, you know, get where they want to be in the world so they can do the same down the road. It's more important than what's in your bank account. Yeah. It really is like, you know, if you had $10 million tomorrow and you went and you bought your yacht or wherever your dream is, right? That sensation lasts for like 2 days, maybe. And then where are you? It's sort of like the idea of like, I want to retire and go on a beach somewhere. Okay, well, you've had your 15th margarita for in a day and a half. Then what? What are you about? What's there?
It's funny saying that. I had a friend once who was talking about their dream is to go like get a beach place, and they only needed X amount of money. And I said, but what are you going to do when you got there? And they hadn't thought any further ahead. And I was like, well, how are you going to get there? And they didn't know how they were going to, that it was their dream. And I said, well, that's all it's going to be. You've dreamed, but you don't even know when you're going to get there. You're going to be bored shitless for weeks after. You're going to read a book. What happens when you finish the book? You sit in front of your beach. What happens there? Do you know what I mean? So,
and I think too, it's just like, you know, when you have a little business or you have a team, like you're rowing together, and that's what humans are meant to do. Yeah. Like we're meant to take a pail of something and lift it up, take it uphill. Yeah. And we're really meant to do it is coordinate with other people to do that. And if you take all of that out of your life and you're just sitting on a pile of money, man, that's miserable. And, you know, I used to do in-home sales, right? Go to people's homes and sell stuff. I was really good at it, right? And I remember I would go to these really wealthy retired doctors, whatever. They spent all their life working, no friends, family didn't really care for them. And the most excited they were in months was me coming to give them an estimate on a new roof.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And I was like, that's not the person I want to be, right? There's nothing fulfilling about that. And like, for me, just that money piece can be poisonous if it's not dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a sensation. How would you like to be remembered?
That's a really good question. For me, someone who really embraced life, right? Hopefully someone who made other people's days more enjoyable and tolerable, right? Someone who was optimistic, who saw the best in things, who liked to be happy and embrace challenges. If that could be some combination of that, made them laugh when I walked in the room, they were happy to see me. That's good enough for me.
Excellent. Well, that was your in-depth. That was an incredible story, mate. How do you feel?
I feel good. Yeah, I had no idea how
Yeah.
that,
It was like a therapy session.
Yeah, totally. I was like trying to lie down,
Yeah.
And it was really a challenge to like,
Get it all in.
40 years of shit into an hour, So I hope I wasn't too like all over the place because
No. That's my job to try and keep guided in. But no, I think it's an incredible story. You shared a lot. You've been through a lot and shared a lot. And I got a sneaky feeling there'll be an in-depth part 2 at some point. What you guys have done over the last few years has been incredible. I'm just going to go to the comments here. Yelchin says, "Hey guys, great to see you." Lazar is here, says, "Hey guys." Isa says, "What makes people grow is failure." So true, John. People are afraid of failures and not knowing that is what moves them slowly into real success. Wellington says, "Great interview. Thank you, John, for your time." Sabi says, "Very interesting indeed. A very smart business model." Follows up with, "Does John and Thras have a process for early stage sellers to assist with an exit strategy?" Which we'll get to in a minute. Angela says, "For life needs 1, something to do; 2, someone to love; 3, someone to believe in; 4, something to hope for." Couldn't have said that better. Yeah. Anthony said, "This has been a very inspirational interview." So, John, let's go back to that question quickly, which is, does John and Thrasio have a process for early stage sellers to assist with exit strategy?
We thought about building this out, and we're working on it, right? Yeah. It'd be something that's I try to do it on a one-on-one basis whenever I'm at somewhere, to find help. But we thought about like an incubator program that will get people to a scale to where they might be a fit for us. Yeah. And again, like it's really awesome to see someone who just started something find their way to success. And it's really cool if you give them a little tip that works or 2, or say, "Hey, do this." And, like, I think it was Elon Musk who said something along the lines of like the key to networking is giving
everything. Yeah. Just give it all away. It's not rocket science. Gary Vee does the same thing. We're in 2020. I think when you lock the knowledge up, people are going to take knowledge in 2 ways, right? There's those who will pay for it, and then there's those who won't. You can't force either party. It's going to happen how it's going to happen, because some people want to pay you to do the work for that knowledge. Some people just want the knowledge for free. And I think you just got to leave people to their own devices. And I think that's the best way of moving forward, especially like you said, with networking and everything else.
Totally. Yeah.
John, it's been an absolute pleasure. Good luck with the future. Thank you for coming on today. Guys, thanks for joining us. I'll be back here again 4 p.m. tomorrow. Actually, before we go, John, is the best way to contact you if people want to reach you?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn. I do Facebook, but not that passionately. Or my email is john@thras.io. You can always reach out to me directly then. That way.
Superb. Excellent. Thanks, guys. See you back here 4 p.m. tomorrow, John. Thanks again. Take care and look after your family. Bye.
All right. Sounds good, buddy.